So the 2019 champion of LVO, Brandon Grant, thanks so much for joining us. I really would love you to, because I know that you've got this mind that remembers details of games and the way things have played out. I'd love to know as much as you can remember prior to making the final in 2019, as much as you can remember about how you got there, some highlights, some big points in games, and what got you to that final through the LVO.
Okay. And how long do you want?
Well, not long. Just give us the highlights.
Okay. Then the highlights were that in 2017, I got to the LVO finals for the first time and ended up losing in the finals game to the champion Brett Perkins in a fantastic game that came down to a 4+ die roll, essentially.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. Very memorable game. So coming back in 2019, I felt far more prepared because I'd been in the finals before, and it helped when I was playing these giants of 40K like Sean Naden and my best friend Michael Snyder, and then Alex Harrison in the final. Helped me to keep calm, stay focused on the game, and just do my very best, and it paid off.
We've spoken about this
It
before,
was
the fact that you made it to a final and that kind of that old sporting saying, if you've got to lose a final to win a final. That kind of helped, right? That idea that you'd been there before and you knew what you were getting into and what you had to do to maybe go that next step.
That's exactly it. Michael and I talked after our game, and he ended up getting very excited because he seized the initiative on me back when that was a mechanic. So he went first, even though I'd planned to go first. And we both knew whoever went first had an advantage. And he realized he'd made a mistake in his first movement phase after he'd finished his movement phase and was already doing shooting. And it was too late to go back and fix it, where he'd moved his conscript blob too close to me, and it ended up costing him his entire conscript
Right.
blob. And I think ended up helping give me the game.
R-
So he absolutely had the skills and the list and knew how to run it. But getting overexcited because you're in the finals playing your best friend, it's sometimes it leads to a game-ending mistake.
When you think about the LVO 2019, the whole tournament, not just the final, the whole kind of event, and you'll run up to the final, how are you feeling about it? Like the other games you played and the other opponents you played, how did that all go for you?
Well, I had a lot of fun actually, um, considering I was so familiar with guard because I've been playing guard for so long up to that point. The fact that so many of my opponents were running guard Castellan was a huge advantage for me because oftentimes I knew exactly what they were going to do and even had better ideas of what they should have done than they did. So it definitely paved the way to get to the final. Actually, one of my hardest matches was into TJ Lanigan and his Chaos Demons list at the time because Plague Bearers were actually entirely reasonable at the time into countering Guardsmen and definitely didn't care about Knight Castellans. So our game went back and forth for a
Right.
while.
And he's a good player and a good opponent. So, you make the final, you get to 2019, you're in there in the final. Were there a lot of people taking interest and taking note and kind of gathering around the table and and does that apply a little bit more pressure when all those people start taking notice of what's going on?
Well, I'd never seen anything like it before. There was a crowd gathered around the tables. And I only noticed the crowd, I think, after the last game was done when I looked up and it felt like hundreds of people, but I'm sure it was like 50 people at most. But yeah, everyone was cheering and it was spectacular. It was definitely some pressure. But what helps me in those situations is I think after about the first 5 minutes of starting the 40K game, there is only the 40K game for
Right.
me. And it comes from a lot of practice and focus to be able to do that because absolutely, whether people are cheering for or against you, it can be very distracting when you're trying to focus on the game on the table if you're listening to them.
I don't know how much you're keeping up with players from overseas and players from around the States who are going to be at the LVO this year. Um, but are there any names you're expecting to see at the top? Are there any people you're expecting to see at the final table?
This year, I'm not sure. I always root for Art of War. They're probably some of the strongest players in the US. And now that I've played with them on the WTC, I get to know them a bit better, so I know who I'm dealing with. But other than them, I wouldn't know personally anyone else who is up and coming going to be in the LVO finals. Not to say that they're not deserving to be there or skilled enough to be there, but they wouldn't be on my
Okay.
radar.
The John Lennon and Jack Harpster are names that keep coming up and keep coming back as players that people are just expecting to be, whether or not they're in the finals, in the top 8, and you know them pretty well, as you've just said. So these are two guys who are really skilled and play the game in a great way, right?
Oh, for sure. And both of them, having played them now, they're terrifying on the
Yeah.
tabletop. If you're going to play them, you need to remain calm and remain focused, but also realize that perfect gentlemen though they may be, they're not going to hold back,
Yeah,
at least on the table.
because you've been there a few times, you know when you're playing at the LVO, because there are so many people in the room, and there's that extra little bit of pressure because it's the big final tournament of the year, and so if you're in the running with the ITC, it really is, and this is where you're an expert. It really is a matter of being able to just detach yourself a little bit from the emotion of the game and just keep that calm, cool head. Is that a fair comment?
That's my approach to it
Right.
anyway. Um, if you're focused on how many battle points you need to get into the final while playing your game, that's a bit too much of a distraction. If you're, I'm close and I need to play aggressively or I won't get in, that's fine. You're dictating your play style at the table and you're remaining focused on that play
Yeah.
style. But if your attention is elsewhere, I don't feel like you can play as strong as you could have if you just maintained your focus on the game state and how to play as well as possible every single
Yeah.
game.
Great stuff.
And especially when something like ITC championships on the line because of the number of ITC points available from the LVO, it's a great way to make a mistake that is unforced. Is to get so excited because that's a prospect that your focus is no longer on the game. And again, I love that we open with that with Michael Snyder and I's game because I felt it was such an important um, event or model for how our attention can dictate making a mistake and losing as a
I
result.
feel like every 40K player in the world knows that feeling of getting excited either about an opportunity you can see or the next phase or the thing you really want to do because it's your plan is to do it, and you forget something important, or you make a mistake in movement, or you forget a strat that you wanted to play. These things always come into effect, and particularly when the pressure is on. So that ability to step back and keep calm and keep a cool head is really important, but not something everybody is quite as capable of achieving. Listen, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and all the best with everything over the next little while that you have on your plate.